Shall we begin, Debbie?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Mavis Souls. I'm the president of Lane County Audubon Society. We're very happy to welcome so many people here tonight. So far, we're up to 58 visitors to this Zoom program meeting. We have not had a program meeting since last February, before all of the pandemic issues hit, and little did we know how long it would be before we could actually visually see some of you again. I really miss our times at the program meeting where we can catch up with each other and visit and chat, maybe a hug or a handshake, cupcakes, coffee, tea, all of the typical things that we normally do at our program meetings. Truly miss seeing all of you. So welcome to those of you who are familiar to this process, and then also welcome to folks who maybe not have been to one of our physical program meetings. We're so happy to have Ken here tonight. And one thing that I learned in talking to him initially about this program, it sounds a little, the title is a little odd under the circumstances we're living in right now. But what I realize is his program is going to pay homage to trees and the long-term value of their importance. And I think that'll be a really helpful message for us to take away from this. So thanks for joining us, each of you. And we won't spend a lot of time doing announcements, although I have just a few. And we'll move on to announcements, and then we can move into our program meeting. So because we do want to talk about birds locally a little bit, I just want to remind you that the boxes swifts are using the chimney at Agate Hall on the U of O campus. We did have a Swift event there the first Friday of September, and we counted 7,400 swifts, boxes swifts going into the chimney, which was pretty fun and awesome to see. And there were about 80 people in attendance. Now, for those of you who have not been there, there's a huge parking lot, there's an alley, there's a playground adjacent to it. And so people were all spread out throughout that area with social distancing and masks and everything. So it was a legal get together. And there also were birds seen there this past Sunday during the day going in and out of the chimney. And I think what that is probably an indicator of is the difficulty birds are having with the smoke in the air. And is it daytime? Is it sunset? Is it dawn? And birds might also be having trouble finding food under these circumstances. So we're real concerned about, obviously, the birds migrating through the area right now with the smoke, and then they have to head south to California. And the only thing we're trying to do in our home is make sure we have lots of water out for the birds, because that's really critical for them in these dry times and helping them get through the stresses of this. Also, my second announcement is just that the bird walks are still on hold because we haven't been able to get together to go out sharing scopes, for instance, and being in a tight group trying to look at birds together. We know a number of people who've been out birding and doing that successfully, but only in like a family unit or a small group. And so we wish we could do that, but maybe there'll be another time soon when we can. I also want to specifically thank Debbie Schlenoff, who's hosting this and managing our technical aspects of the program tonight. And then Dennis Arndt also for pulling together the personnel and the program speaker, who we're very excited to hear, and doing some rescheduling in order to make this fit. And so also to each of you that were able to join us tonight, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing the program that we have to listen to tonight. We'll move on. Our Quail newsletter the September issue is out online, and probably people who are getting it by mail have it in their post office box. And so this is one way that we do outreach into the community, is through our newsletter. And we also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page that you can also check for more information about, potentially activities. But right now, that's not the main purpose of our outreach. We try to do education primarily, and then having people learn more about birds and wildlife and habitat, which we all value so much. Okay. Now we'll move on to Dennis, who's going to announce the program for next month.
Just before Dennis starts our announcements, I just wanted to say a couple of things. We're going to try and keep everybody muted. If for some reason your microphone becomes unmuted, please do mute yourself. We just want to control any interfering sounds. And also, if you go to your control panel, wherever that might be on your device, you should see one link that says chat. And if at any point during the presentation a question occurs to you, please feel free to type your question into the chat. And then at the end of Ken's talk, we can present him with those questions and get some of those questions answered. So do feel free to use the chat feature in Zoom to ask your questions, or hold your questions till the end and we'll find a way to get them answered at that point. For the conservation announcement, I just wanted to say that we should be paying attention to the trees and the habitats they provide. We should be paying attention to forest management policy. We should be paying attention to climate policy. But I will sum up my conservation announcement in one word. And let me see if I can get this going here. And there you go. And so I'm now going to turn it over to Dennis.
Well, I wanted to let you all know too that this program tonight is being recorded and it will be available through a link on the Facebook page and also the Lane County Audubon Society web page. So look for that and let other people know if they weren't able to tune in tonight. I want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up. In October, we're going to have Janet Esley's program about the red knot. She was the first one on our schedule to be canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're glad to be able to have her back. She's an artist and a researcher who uses many of her own paintings to tell the story of the long distance migrant sandpiper, the red knot. So this program is going to be on October 27th, which is the fourth Tuesday, the normal time we would have our meetings. Tonight, we're going to have a special guest, Ken Bevis, who is from Washington. And so we're able to, with this Zoom system, able to bring people in from far away. He's an accomplished natural history educator and wildlife biologist. He has a very long title. His title is the Stewardship Biologist for the Small Forest Landowner Office of the Washington Department of Natural Resources. But it's a long title, but he is a very easy guy to get to know. He frequently teaches workshops and classes for Washington State University Extension programs. He's also an accomplished singer-songwriter. He has also acquired some local renown as a nature troubadour. So his program tonight, though, is about dead trees. It doesn't seem to fit the troubadour image, but he's going to talk about the great benefits that we get from these dead trees. So it is our privilege to welcome to the members of the Lane County Audubon Society, Ken Bevis. Ken, you can take over now.
Well, okay. Thank you, Debbie and Dennis and Maeve. What a pleasure to get to meet all of you people, albeit in this strange new world. And so let's see, I am going to try to share my screen, and hopefully many of my introductory statements will flow through the images here. So as Dennis pointed out, yes, I work with small forest landowners all around the state of Washington, and I help them prepare forest management plans, and I give habitat advice to lots of different people. And one of the weird things is I have been doing these classes for quite a few years now, and I had to turn them into this but through the magic of Zoom and PowerPoint and everything, I'm going to be able to basically walk you through at eyeball level a slideshow about dead trees. And let's see if I can make this crazy thing work. There we go. And can you see that, Debbie? Nodding. So, okay, very good. And you know, Debbie made a comment about the chat box. Let's see, how do I get it so I can see that? Let's see here. Sorry about this. I hate this technical silliness here. I'm trying to see my, oh, there it is. Okay, there we go. So if you do make a comment in the chat, we are going to revisit that and go through the questions later. So make sure that your chat box says, who can hear it, say everyone. So just do that. So there we go, right? Debbie's nodding. So, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And so we did this little thing for our WSU programs where we were trying to link it to movies just for the sake of, frankly, marketing. And so we came up with this Dead Trees Excellent Adventure, nothing bogus about dead wood, referencing the classic film Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure that I bet you the people smiling on the various things here have seen this movie, which is about to be redone, interestingly, with the same two characters. And so it's an excellent adventure in regard to what happens to a tree, including after it's dead. And that's really the topic that I'm going to walk through tonight. And I have to say, I've been working with forestry issues for, oh my gosh, a long time now, 40 some odd years. And I've been fascinated with dead trees. And it's been a chance to give this presentation finally where I'm only focused on dead wood. So we're going to do that. So this is, Dennis alluded to my commercial here, and this isn't as important with our Oregon audience, but this is our work group. And I said, this is what we do. We work with a lot of landowners all around the state. So you have an equivalent program in Oregon that comes through Oregon State University Forestry Extension. So many of you may know some of those good folks. So there you go. Okay, so here's my outline. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I'm going to tell you what I told you, and then I'm going to tell you the whole thing again, but not really the same way. So hopefully my cousin Joni will appreciate my efforts at a lesson here. She's a retired teacher, by the way. So we're going to do a little bit about the forest. I'm going to tell you what a tree is, the life cycle of dead trees, primary excavators, secondaries, the tree falls over, it's still got value. A little bit about management, you know, meaning people might go, okay, cool, Ken, dead trees are okay, but what about? And so then at the very end, I actually added a little bit about fire, and I have a story about what happened to our house, and we're going to get there. So think about forest for a minute, because forests are in motion, except it's in slow motion. You can't see them change very quickly, and we tend to think of them as being static, but they're not. This stand, that last stand, that alder stand, is only about 35 years old. This forest is about 100 years old, having been logged over about 1920, you know, then looking at true old growth forests, that stand has been developing way over on the coast of Washington for 500, 600, 700 years. And they're always changing, you know, they're growing slowly, trees layering all around, and the habitat complexity going forward. And within those, there's all these trees of different characteristics, like that nice big dead one there. So think about trees for a minute, that a tree is a living entity that has all of these different characteristics. And it's really, in terms of habitat, it's a three-dimensional feature that changes constantly. And I've said that a couple times already, but that change is a really important thing to note as forests develop. And what we do as foresters is you pay close attention to that, and you look at what a forest is like today and then anticipate what it's going to be like in the future based on all of the different things that happen there. Well, trees, you know, they're different. they're different ages, they're different states of growth and decay in this complex known as the forest. And sometimes you'll come onto these really interesting dead structures. And I came upon my fascination with dead trees some years back. Actually, I can admit this now. I used to be a spotted owl biologist. I used to hide that fact because it was pretty controversial. You know, what do you do? Oh, you know, I'm like a forestry technician, but I was actually out looking for spotted owls. I was one of those people that found them. And you would see dead trees out there in the forest sometimes. And you know, you might see something like this. That is a really deep excavation into the side of this great big Douglas fir snag here. So there's always something going on with a tree. You might have one that has an old scar that the tree has healed over, like on these, where the bark is actually, and inside of that is an old wound, probably from a fire on this grand fir on the left. But every tree's got a unique story, and it wears its history on its surface. So it's pretty interesting out in a forest because all of those things are there. Well, you know, the forest, we like to think of a forest as being this happy green canopy over our heads, swaying in the breeze, singing tree songs. But trees die regularly, and they might die just a few at a time, let's say from insects or disease. And I love this when you say disease in the forest, you're usually referring to fungus. Fungus is the great enemy of plants. And so, you know, something like this, where the forest is growing, but there's a dead one, there's a dead one. Or you could get a whole bunch killed at the same time, usually from some external event, classically fire. And oh man, we're having such a wake up moment with more fire here. And for those far away, the area around Eugene, Oregon is suffering from a gigantic forest fire just to the east that is giving them some of the worst air quality in the world right now. So congratulations on that, Debbie. Yeah, way to go. So, but anyway, or you could have lots of trees killed like from a fire. In a mature forest in the wetter areas, you could have a small scale slow motion thing like that. And root rot is the fungal disease that'll take out these little pockets of trees like that. And I'm assuming you can see my cursor, right? Debbie, can you see that? Okay, good. I can use that like a pointer. And so root rot will kill trees in a little area, say, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trees across, but it'll take 40 years for the tree to die. And once again, a fire, you know, a fire goes ripping through there. This is near where I live that picture was taken 2015, 1 year after that fire went through there and killed that stand of Douglas fir. And side note, today that stand looks almost the same. So lots killed at the same time. This picture was taken 2 years ago. So that fire occurred, let's do the math here, 1990 to, how many years is that? Help me out here. Yeah, 28. Thank you. I read your lips, Debbie. That was good. Yeah, so, you know, here we are 28 years later with the green understory coming in. You might have wind throw. A big windstorm comes through, breaks the tops off, knocks them over, like this one up by Colville up in Northeast Washington. I think this was kind of like a microburst on this case where it snapped off a bunch of trees. Well, you know, you go out into the forest, even the wetter forest, and you walk around and you will often see these old remnants like this, these old fire-scarred snags. And so these two right here have probably stood there, and I'm totally making this up, but on the crest of the Cascades on the left here, that tree's been standing there for 300 years or more. This one over here on the right is up near Stevens Pass, big burn scar in the middle, and that thing's been standing there a similar scale of time, many centuries. So that's a really important thing, that whatever the reason that the tree died would always persist. And it's usually a long time. I mean, and depending on the climate, how wet it is and everything, but even, I'll show you in a few minutes, even in some of the wettest, fastest decaying places would persist for a long time, even after it's been burned. So that's one of your take-home points right there. So let's talk about a tree for a minute here. So, you know, what is a tree? And we think of trees as being these, excuse me, living, you know, entities with their, you know, but well, and you remember this classic diagram here, and thanks Bing, with the pith and the xylem. Let's see, where is it? The xylem moves water from the ground up to the leaves, and the phloem moves nutrients created through photosynthesis down to the roots. So you have this two-way conduction system going on in the middle of the tree. The heartwood and the pith no longer is conducting. So basically all of the action is in the xylem and the phloem in terms of water going up, nutrients going down, with the bark on the outside protecting this organism. And within that, there's these pitch tubes that are waiting to expel invaders who might try to get in there and munch on the tree while the tree is alive. But most of a tree is dead tissue. Most of a tree is dead. It's not alive. It's like your fingernails. The only living parts of a tree are that cambium layer. Let's go back one here for a second. Is the cambium layer right by the phloem, and the root tips and the leaves. The rest of a tree is essentially dead tissue. I mean, it's functional dead tissue, but, and here's an interesting thing about a tree too, that even within that, it has the ability to compartmentalize invaders. And, once heart rot gets in there, I'm not really sure how the tree handles that, but basically a tree can be alive and functioning and have, it can be hollow. But the tree is fine. The tree is growing because the living parts are out here on the outside. And this cut cedar here, there's the sapwood right there, that wet part. It hasn't been cut for long. There's the cambium. All the rest of this is dead tissue. So that's just an important point, that most of a tree is dead tissue. Okay. So the life cycle of a dead tree, yes, that's deliberately, what's the expression where you have something that's kind of contradictory, but it actually makes sense? That's one of those. If somebody knows that word, let me know. So, a tree is actively trying to keep the FBI out, fungus, bugs, and insects, it's just a good acronym, by way of those pitch tubes. And trees, a quote, healthy tree is actively repelling the things that are trying to eat it, particularly fungus and insects. And, but when something happens, drought, fire, I don't know, whatever it is that kills the whole tree, not just part of it. Because one thing about a tree is part of a tree can be killed, but the whole tree still functions. We've all seen trees that have been scuffed up on one side, but they're still green on the top. But when the tree finally succumbs, right after it's dead, there'll still be little twigs. This is the life cycle of a dead tree. The cambium is still there, and the insects are on it immediately, because the cambium is where the sugars are. And so when you see a tree like this that still has fine branches, it's only been dead for a few years or less than that, you'll start to see holes in the bark like this. That's woodpeckers going after these guys. And here's the shallow dwelling insects that eat cambium that are right under the bark, and they come in really quickly. There's different waves of insects. A tidbit about insects too is they will often have fungal spores on their surface. So when they go into the tree, they will infect the tree with the fungus. And, a dead tree will age over many decades. Here we are again with a busted off one. This one has a cool pileated cavity in it, finally softening up and then finally falling over. This is a diagram from a nature trail in the Quinault rainforest in Washington. But this is just so interesting to me, because I think these numbers are actually not long enough. But look at this, 100 years after the tree is dead, this is saying it's still standing there as a broken off stub. I think it looks more like that at 100, but still, and at 200, it's still there. It's a long time. They last a long time. Falls over, becomes a log, it's still there. The log starts to break down, or breaks down, I should say, under the influence of fungus mostly, creates a really different substrate on the forest floor. I like to look at this, that the shrub, and somebody in this program can name this plant, but here's a broadleaf forb down on the forest floor, and on the log itself, there's moss, and there's moss up here. No moss over here, but moss on the wood. So the wood is a whole different substrate doing something different than the ground. And you'll sometimes get trees growing out of logs, the nurse log phenomenon. And this is something on the west side. So it can be a substrate. No, it is a substrate for a different set of plant life. As it breaks down, it adds humus and it becomes soil. So the rotting wood basically feeds the whole system, and it can take a long, long time. That's a really important point, that it takes a long time, even in systems under the influence of fire. And I'm not going to go way deep there, but the dead wood is important. So these forest scientists have created these guides for describing these decay conditions where, and it's something you can't really measure. There's probably in the audience some physical scientists or engineers or people who are used to being able to measure things precisely, run statistics on them, have really, robust data sets. It's hard to do that with a rotting tree because part of the tree is really soft and rotten and part of the tree is still hard. So you generalize, and it's pretty subjective, but it works that this is a predictable sequence of how these things go. And so when you go out and do research on dead trees, you have to use one of these systems. So key point, dead wood is essential to forest ecology. And we've actually become quite a bit more aware of this in about the last 50 years. There's been a significant paradigm shift, if you want to call it that, with new forestry, Jerry Franklin, ecological awareness about dead wood, and it's reflected in some of our management practices to a certain degree. So there you go. And now, say the dead wood is great habitat. It's a great habitat feature for a whole bunch of species, including some cool birds, which I bet many, many people in this room are very familiar with. So let's introduce you to a few of these dead wood associated wildlife species. Let's start with the primary cavity excavators. These are woodpeckers. These are birds that use that chisel and tweezer on the top of their head to carve holes in wood, dead wood usually, to feed and nest. So these are pileated woodpecker excavations that are sort of oval. That thing right there is about probably 6 inches by 4 inches. These are big birds. If I was here in person, I'd bring one of my prized loner possessions, but it's a stuffed pileated. They're about the size of a crow. This one is a male or a female, Auduboners? Male or female? Somebody's saying it. That's a male because it has the mustache and the red goes all the way to the tip of the nose there. I didn't look at the chat. Sometimes people just say, male, good job, Julia. Yeah, baby. Okay, there you go. There you go. Colt's foot. Thank you, Nan. See, this is what happens when I peek at the chat. Okay, I turned it off again. So primary cavity excavators have this pretty amazing life histories. This was right outside of our house. I planted this snag in the yard, right where you can see it. And one morning, this pileated was out there. Now this is my stuffed pileated with a flat-headed borer that came out of a piece of firewood. That's a wood-boring insect that pileateds are particularly good at getting because they can excavate so deeply. So if you wonder how I got that pileated to hold still, it's because he was stuffed. And woody woodpecker was modeled after the pileated woodpecker by the cartoonist Bert Lance, I believe was his name, in the 1920s, who saw one in the Sierra Nevadas. There you go. So here he is. There's the snag. I put this snag up where I can look at it right out the door. It's right there. And this guy came one day and my wife got these marvelous photos of this bird poking around, trying to find, it's just so cool. We felt really privileged. And I have not seen one here since, so there we go. Other primary cavity excavators, woodpeckers, include the sapsuckers, many of them migratory, not all. Hairy woodpeckers, that's a female, being kind of the, I like to call them everyman's woodpecker because they occur in all kinds of different forest types. They're medium-sized and they're out there. A little one's a downy woodpecker. Okay, there's a downy. Look how short that beak is there compared to the hairy. When you see them side by side, it's pretty obvious. These are little guys, red-breasted nuthatch. They actually can excavate in really soft wood and flickers. Wick, 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 wick. After you've heard flickers and pileateds both, they don't sound exactly alike. They sound kind of alike, but not exactly. But there's our flicker that eat mostly ants, and they do excavate, but in softer wood because their beak, look at the beak, it's a little bit curved, and it's not quite as robust as that pileated. I think this is so interesting. So there's people that go out there and study this stuff, including, hey, you probably read this. Dennis, did you finish reading my thesis yet? No? Yeah, not yet. Okay. The primary cavity excavator birds. I actually managed to get a master's degree on woodpeckers and trees. It's a classic from the last century. There's 4 printed versions of it. I have 2 of them. One's in the library. And no, they've not completed the movie version yet. Okay, but we're looking for a screenwriter in case somebody in this room here, and suggestions for lead roles, because I'm starting to look a little rusty. So I need, you know, young, vigorous people. So, okay. And let me know if you like the ending, by the way, when you read it. So there you go. And so here's your special feature for tonight. This may or may not work. So I'm going to try something here. I also write songs, and I'm not sure if I'm accomplished, Dennis, but I laughed at that, saying that I'm accomplished. So I'm going to take the headset off and sit it right in front of me. And Debbie and Maeve, you nod. I can see you two on there if you can hear what I'm doing, okay? All right. This is innovation here. It's almost primitive. I'm a woodpecker, the king of the trees. I got pattern brains, I do as I please. Hey, hey! How's that sound? You can hear it? Hey, hey! I'm the king of the woods. I'm a crazy red hammer, I make cavities. Homes for you, homes for me. Hey, hey! I'm the king of the woods. By the way, this song is biologically correct. I climb up the trees, tapping, tappy, tap. Listening for that insect cave. And I find that hollow sound. I axe my way in, and I slip in my sticky, sticky tongue. Yum! I'm a woodpecker, the king of the trees. I got pattern brains, I do as I please. Hey, hey! I'm the king of the woods. I'm a crazy red hammer, I make cavities. Homes for you, homes for me. Hey, hey! I'm the king of the woods. I got rhythm in my bones, I'm synchronized. I bang on the highest place I find. I play my licks, I whack my tricks, I bang on my tree drum. And sometimes I sing, it's well fun. Put-a-ha-ha, put-a-ha-ha, wicka-wicka, wicka-wicka, hey, hey. I'm the king of the woods. Rhythm break. Hey, hey, I'm the king of the woods. I'm a woodpecker, the king of the trees. I got pattern brains, I do as I please. Hey, hey, I'm the king of the woods. Hey, hey, I'm the king of the woods. Did that work? That did work. Wow. I mean, I don't know. It just, I found out that people will remember if I do a song. It's funny. Okay, so let's see here. Hey, excellent. Delete. So you can hear that? Okay. All right. I'm just tickled. Very good. And William Weiler, he has heard that many times. He's a singer too. And Bill, were you going, hey, hey? Yeah, you were. I know you were. Okay. So here's something about primary cavity excavators is that they will make or improve a new cavity every single year. They have to do this. Woodpeckers don't use nest boxes because they just got to do it. They go and you see this little hole in a tree. That's a big hole. That's pileated when there. But it's pretty amazing how they do this because they take that chisel. And they do have padded brains. They don't get concussions. Woodpeckers have some kind of an amazing adaptation, not just in the padding of their brain, but even in the chemistry of their brain, apparently, that they don't suffer impact injuries. There's been some research on this that's fairly remarkable. And so this is a male hairy woodpecker flicking chips. Here's a pileated. I love this one. And so apparently they reach in and they will loosen them up, grab them, and flick them out of there. Now, I've thought about this a lot. How in the world do they do that inside? They must be like chick, 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 until they got enough room to make that full stroke. Because when you watch a woodpecker banging on a tree with its head, it's like, holy smokes, it's about the forcefulness of as if you were swinging your fist. So they use that chiseled tweezer, 2 toes up, 2 toes back, and make these cavities, which are a great place to raise your young. It's a very secure environment. They have a high fledging rates among birds, and so it's because there's one way in. It's this little castle, and the woodpecker sits right here. Cool thing about woodpeckers too is they are truly modern birds, that the male and the female both brood. So they both will go in there and sit on the eggs, and then they team raise the babies. They go back and forth, back and forth. Anyway, so it's a really great place to raise a family. Good snags that produce the right kind of wood for them to excavate often are broken off. They're of larger diameters. This gets to Ron and Beth's question. Conifers conifers are good, but hardwoods are okay too, but they need to be of larger diameter. Often they're broken off. Oftentimes the trees that break off will get the softening in the stem before it falls over and becomes a log. So a lot of really good cavity snags will be busted. And every now and then you'll see one back in the forest where they'll be like, I love this one on the right. It's busted off. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 visible cavities right here, and there were like 8 more on the other side. So as the tree softens from the top, they'll excavate here, then they'll move down, they'll do another one here, they'll do another one here, and they'll just keep going right down that tree. And if you have the right diameter and a Douglas fir, ponderosa pine larch, sometimes there'll be dozens of cavities in these really valuable trees. Yeah, something like this thing right here that had been standing as long as the guy that owned this land had had it for 40 years. And he told me when he moved there 40 years ago, that tree looked almost the same and it was already full of cavities. And then it fell over like 2 years ago, finally. So, and look how many are on this one. So anyway, so they can have really, really good features. Here's a nice one right here. Not too tall, but there's a cavity in it. And a classic. I bet you every single person in here knows of a dead tree somewhere in your ramblings that you've been looking at for years. The same tree has been out there for many, many years. So there you go. Yeah, here's a big one over on the coast of Washington. Often the broken off ones last the longest. So how about that picture on the left? That's through my spotting scope with my phone. Pretty crazy, huh? So there's a mountain bluebird and there's a tree swallow. These are all the secondary species. Kestrels being cavity nesters. These are birds that are dependent on those woodpeckers to make those cavities. So, others, the little chickadees, the wrens, brown creepers. There's a surprising number of birds that are tied to the woodpecker's keystone role of making those perfect nest cavities in the perfect dead tree. Owls, the little toot owls, the saw-whet, the pygmies, the screech, they can't make a nest. They don't make a nest of any kind, and those little owls just love cavities. How about that cool picture right there? That's from Con-Tron, if anybody knows Con. Yes, and so these small owls are really tied to the presence of a hole in a tree, and a woodpecker hole was just the perfect one. Cavity nesting ducks, to me, that always just seems just bizarre. Wood ducks, golden eyes, hooded mergansers. How in the world could they find enough holes to exist? But they do. And so there you go. The mammals that use these cavities, flying squirrels, Douglas squirrels, marten, bats. Bats really like to go into cavities. Vos swifts like to go into hollow trees, their natural habitat being that big broken off hollow cedar tree. I don't know if they would go in like a pileated cavity, but similar, these big dead trees would be their natural habitat. But yes, so mammals that would use them. Down log falls over. The down log is a really good habitat feature for a lot of amphibians, small mammals using those little runways underneath. Excellent habitat feature. Whole bunch of things use down logs, and here's just some examples. And they tend to be small mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and some birds. So the little stuff lives under the log after it falls over. Yeah, and it's moist in there too. That wood holds moisture way better than like rock and such does. So the downwood can be a moist habitat feature, allowing for. I was at a field day and I was pulling the bark off, describing to some people the insect channels here, and I pulled it off, and it was a chorus frog. This was in a dry spot too, up there in the woods. So there's an animal that benefits from a log. They last a long time, even in wet habitats. So like this one, look, we got trees growing right next to it. We got bushes coming out of it. This was at that same rainforest in the Quinault where they had a little sign that was estimating this tree had been down about 150 years. And these trees growing out of it are probably 100 years old themselves. And the log is recognizable. There it is right there. So that thing's going to be there a while longer. Okay, does anybody know where Moclips is? You ever heard of Moclips? It's over by Ocean Shores. It's the southwest corner of the Olympic Peninsula. And so this is south of the Hoh Rainforest, but it's wet. I mean, it's like way wet. And I visited this nice lady right here, and she goes, "Oh, I got to show you my stump." So we go over and we look at this thing, and these are the springboard holes. She's got her hand in one of them where the old time loggers with their crosscut saws, and they had cut this thing down about the time of World War I. And I like to imagine this was one of those trees that was cut for building airplanes for the war effort. So there was a period where they went after these pure grained, 600-year, that was a spruce. Well, right next to that stump, and this is just basically stepping, is the butt log. And they took the top of the tree, and this bottom 20 feet was, I think it was probably too big to move. But this is in one of the wettest forests in North America, a spruce, which is a fairly soft wood. And 100 years later, that thing is still intact. So we kind of have a testimonial here to how long downwood can last. So just that. So when you see a feature like this in the forest, think of it as being something of high value with a long timeline of how good it is. And then as it breaks down, down there in the duff, it's really fun to dig around in the duff. Do this with kids. Just start pulling apart rotting wood or roll pieces over and then put them back in case somebody's underneath of it. And you could get lucky and find a northwestern salamander, for example, which is uncommon, but more often you're going to find stuff like this, millipedes. You can't see these guys. That's a springtail. Termites. There's all kinds of insect life down there in the duff. Lots of fauna. I didn't take this picture, but apparently this Ensatina, they guard their eggs. So this is a salamander down in one of those cavities in a rotting log. So lots of stuff living in the rotting log. And, this is something about the Pacific Northwest, particularly the wetter portions, but this is what's really going on down there. And I should get the GWIS numbers about how many basquillion kiloton, quadrats of fungal mycelium and how many miles there are, but it's a lot. And the biomass of fungus breaking down the wood is just tremendous. Mushrooms are only like the apple of the apple tree. It's just the fruiting bodies which come and go, but that mycelium is down there. So the western forest is kind of the great kingdom of fungus more than the kingdom of pileated woodpeckers and Sasquatch and everything else. So that's just an important tidbit to remember, that much of the biological activity has to do with the breakdown of wood and plant matter by way of fungus. So there we go. So feeds everything, the rotting wood, the rotting material feeds everything, drives the whole system, and it's something to be very conscious of. So here's one of my take homes too, is the number of species, vertebrate species associated with dead wood is something like 38 to 40% of the forest species are somehow tied to dead wood. By way of a cavity, by feeding, by perching, something. And you start thinking about it, and the list is pretty darn long. Martins and bats and chickadees and pileatids and snakes. And so it's a really, really, really important habitat feature that's worthy of what's the word? I've described myself as an evangelical snaggist, because my life's mission is to, one of them is to just remind people of the value of dead trees. And it gets to be pretty darn interesting. I love this quote: "Such trees are dead, true enough, but theirs is a lively death indeed." So lots going on. Deadwood persists, lots of species using it. So last section here is, let's talk about human influence on the landscape. And we have a long history of timber harvest, well, all over the whole country here in the Northwest. And I've had this, worked in some version of land management for a long time now. And you'll often hear this: "Oh, there's plenty of snags. They're over there. Where are they?" "Well, they're over there." Well, a lot of our harvests are even age harvests. And I hate to break it to you, but there ain't a single wildlife tree out there on that 40-acre piece. Even down here in the riparian zone, by the way, that's a bald eagle sitting on a nest in the riparian buffer, which is like 50 feet wide on a creek down here, right next to this big clear cut. But aren't there plenty of them out there? Huh. And how about hazard tree management? Whenever people are on the landscape, the tendency of park people and all those things, if a tree has any semblance of deadness to it, they cut it down. This was in a picnic area that was hardly ever used. On the very edge of the picnic area, we didn't even have a picnic table anywhere near it. And look at this thing. The Vos swifts could have lived in that tree, and they cut it down because they were afraid of it. I'm still mad about that one. But anyway, so we do hazard tree management, and we like to burn firewood. And how many of us in this group have gone out and cut down a great big snag because it was perfect firewood? I mean, I have. They're really fun to gather, but it's like, oh geez. So anyway, our land management tends to remove them. So okay, we've come around and we're saying, all right, we need to have these things out there. How many do we need? We want to have viable populations of woodpeckers and chickadees and everything. How many do we need? Well, it's actually a little complicated. And there's been research where they've tried to come up with guidelines, some general things. And by the way, this is the little bit technical part. Some species need soft ones, like chickadees and nuthatches. Some tree species are better, in quotes, because they might stand longer, because they might have a hard outside, that sort of thing. So, this is where we get to it. So in Washington, the Department of Natural Resources, my agency, I wore my my agency shirt here. I'm waving the flag here. We actually, regulate forest practices. So if you're going to do a harvest, you have to get a permit through the state, acknowledging that you are going to meet the environmental standards in the law, which include wildlife trees at the rate of 2 per acre that provide habitat for cavity nesting species if they exist. You don't have to provide them. And if they're not a safety hazard. So the out is, if it's that one might follow me, you can cut it. And they never enforce it. And so, but the good news is that it indicates the law's intent and the recognition of the importance of this habitat. So, I looked in Oregon. I actually checked on this today. Oregon has a weaker rule. You have to have 2 wildlife trees per acre and 2 down logs if your harvest unit is over 25 acres. Otherwise, it's not required. And there's no definition of what they are that's really easy to follow. And so once again, the intent is there, but it's really hard to enforce. So in general, in commercial timber harvest, providing these habitats is often up to the operator, and it's kind of a fluke. So there's where small landowners come in, because people are managing their property and they can actually make decisions on which trees to maintain and that sort of thing. So it's out there. And in our small landowners, I think this is so interesting that we just did a national survey again about values of small forest landowner. Number 1 was scenic. It was beauty. People want to preserve the beauty and the scenic nature of their forest. Number 2, in a national survey of a couple thousand people, was wildlife habitat. We want to maintain wildlife habitat. It's like, really? So how do you do that? I appreciate that. Let's go into actionable items, and hence my emphasis on wildlife trees. It's like, well, you know what? Keep the big ones, like this lovely couple right here. They had preserved this tree because they liked it. And this landowner was like, hey, check out my woodpecker cavity. So that's a good thing. So that's how you do it. So here's what you try for. Let's go for 4 per acre. Let's have 2 hard and 2 soft. Notice that's double the state standard. But the best thing you can do, and I'm saying this for the group, is to know what a good one is. Know what a good one looks like. The broken top, I call them cavity trees. If you have cavity trees, keep that thing. And if you have trees that could turn into a cavity tree, those are the ones to really emphasize. So there was a question earlier in the chat about, are some trees better than others? Yes, some are better, but we'll take what we can get. So, that's all part of the deal. Bigger in diameter is better because it has more wood to work with. You can have more species. Broken tops are great. Yeah, I said for that because they soften. And, I'll take whatever species we can get. You can't always be selective. If you can, yeah, cedars, Doug fir, larch, ponderosa pine. There are some that are better, but we'll take what we can get wherever we are. Oh, here we go. There we go. Grand fir is actually a really good wildlife tree. Hardwoods, big leaf maple, cottonwoods, alder are the best when they're still partially alive because their roots rot out more quickly and they tip over. And so if you want to have one that lasts longer standing, conifers actually last a little bit longer. And the longevity is very, very affected by soil type and wind and whether the top is out of it. So there's a whole science and art to picking the ones that you might want. So if you have them, protect them. If you don't have them, you could make some. You could create snags by way, you could girdle them. You could hire climbers. You could have these amazing arborists go up and knock it off halfway, rough it up. Can you hear me, Debbie? Okay, good. Yep. So you could create some. You can use, if you're doing a harvest and there's lots of harvesting going on using these big machines, you have these big machines reach up and cut it off about 8 feet, 8 to 12 feet. And watch this thing. It makes a snag in like 14 seconds. And then they can haul the log away. You could leave it on the forest floor. But there you go. Look at that. It's a little broken off snag. It's about 8 or 12 feet high. I know. Isn't that crazy? And it works. And some guys do it a lot, but a lot don't. But it's a really good, safe technique too. Don't do it like this. I like this. There's the bucket, the ladder, oh my God. Get help. Find a pro, right? And it works. If you ever drive across Interstate 90 in Washington by the little town of Roslyn, you'll see this resort called Suncadia, which is kind of like Sun River down by down by a bend. And they made a bunch of snags 20 years ago. It was the year 2000 when they built the place, and now they're full of woodpecker holes. It is just a totally cool thing. They made like 500 of these because they wanted wildlife habitat to be part of this neighborhood. So it works. So there you go. Okay, I'm almost done. I felt like I screwed up there and I have to hurry now. But I think we got Debbie says we're good. What else is everybody gonna do? All right. Okay, so fires, we're all suffering through this now, and there's going to be, oh my God, big areas of freshly killed trees. And there's going to be a debate about whether to salvage log or not, which, by the way, the biggest damage from salvage logging is to the soil, because the soil is really fragile. And in order to salvage log, you have to cut the trees pretty much within a year or they start to crack and they don't have any value. And it can be really hard on the long-term productivity of a site. So that's worth entering into discussion wherever you can. But fires, you'll get this enormous pulse of dead wood. And sometimes, usually, the burn pattern in fires is really variable. You're going to see this on your big burns there. There's going to be little patches of trees that survive over there, down in the draw, up on the side of the hill. How come? And it will be a total fluke as to how the wind was blowing that, half hour when the fire was there. So, a lot of times the outcome of a fire ecologically is like, it can be positive, and it just really depends how hot and how much it burns and all that. But you're about to get into the middle of that. So like this aspen sprout right here, the fire was July 14 to 18 of 2014. This was in September. Right after this aspen growth was killed, it sprouted that year. And today those trees are 14 feet high. And this is 6 years later. And so aspens are one species that just responds tremendously. Over here on the right, here's a patch where this tree survived, and so did some of the others. Now there's less competition. You essentially got a thinning. The little trees were taken out. This stand was, open enough that it kind of had that desired thinning effect that we do mechanically a lot. So it's complex, and the recovery from fire is going to be based on a lot of factors, and it's really fascinating to watch it happen. So here's my story. It's a snaggy story. So this is my wife and I's property. This is in about the year 2010. 2011, 2012, nice ponderosa pines, open grown, look at the bitterbrush in here. Oh my God, we had the most beautiful shrub pine, and we had these bird species, bright-breasted nuthatch, grosbeak, some Douglas squirrels, not that many woodpeckers. We only had one snag on the property, but it looks pretty nice, doesn't it? Oops. August 1st, 2014, a trailer got a flat tire on the highway a mile from us. And in 45 minutes, the wind was blowing about 35 miles an hour. It burned across that same hill. So that last picture was from right here where the cursor is looking towards where this picture is from. And check that out. All that bitterbrush, it's gone. This is 2 days later. So this is August 3rd. And this is our property right here. And our house survived. Firefighters saved our house. Helicopter, we're those people out there in the front country, all the ones that are causing all the trouble. We're some of them, but it killed everything. But this picture was taken on that same hill, and can we move? Let's move the chat out of the way there just a little bit. Look at all these snags, and look what's happened to them. They've broken off, and that picture before, they've all got tops, but every one of these trees died. I was hoping they'd survive, but they didn't. And since then, they have just snapped off. So this next picture is taken from right down here in this corner. And this tree right here is the one I'm about to feature. And so look at this. Look at the shrub layer. We have ceanothus. We've got a lot of serviceberry, chokecherry, snowberry came in. We had no snowberry before. Now we've got tons. But they're broken off. And now it's been 6 years, and they've softened enough to start getting cavities. This tree had a kestrel nest in the top. It had a flicker nest in the middle. It had a bluebird in a flicker cavity down here, and I put a box on it and got a second bluebird side by side. Now we have kestrels, hairy woodpeckers, Lewis's woodpeckers, lots of flickers, way more bluebirds, tree swallows and violet green swallows, pygmy nuthatches. It's been a significant species composition shift in this snag forest. And the snag forest has had just tremendous amounts of bird life, and the shrub layer has recovered. There's a few volunteer ponderosa pines coming in now, but it's just totally amazing. And this year with COVID, I've been home all the time, working at home. So I've been able to observe this even more than normal when I've haven't been at home as much. So that's my snaggy story. It's like, I'll be darned. And it's such an irony that the snag guy owns a snag patch, right? So I've got 52 broken top snags all across here, and I'm basically monitoring their presence. I had a climber come and knock the tops out of 14 snags. We paid him for 2 days of work, and in a great irony of the world, most of those are still standing, but then the wind broke the rest of them off. So I really didn't have to do that, but I didn't know. So anyway, so there you go. So the snag guy owns a snag patch. This is a digression, but the Woodland Fish and Wildlife Project is a cooperative between Oregon State University Extension and Washington DNR and Oregon Fish and Wildlife and a bunch of other partners, conservation districts. We have this committee, and we produce this set of they're like articles, they're publications aimed at small forest landowners. And we did one last year, timely, called After the Burn. Myself and Nicole Strong. Does anybody know Nicole Strong from Oregon State University Extension? So Nicole and I wrote this article, but it's all about what a small landowner can do, I don't know about should do, but it's about that very topic. So if you know somebody whose forest burned up, point them to that. So almost done. Take-home messages: deadwood, vitally important in forest ecosystems. It's not waste, it's the good stuff. Provides crucial habitat for about a third of the forest species, 38%. And it can be provided for in management, but it has to be done consciously. You have to be paying attention to the really good structures and getting them out there. So dead trees are beautiful, full of life. When you run into people who are saying like, you know what, we got to get them out of there because they're no good. It's like, well, not necessarily. A healthy forest. We keep talking about healthy forest. Everybody goes, healthy forest is like apple pie mom and patriotism. Are you in favor of apple pie? Absolutely. Are you in favor of a healthy forest? Yes. Okay. What is that? I want nice green leafy trees. That's healthy. It's like, well, that's good. Yeah, you want green leafy trees that can resist bugs and drought, which is actually, you want the right tree in the right place, vigorous enough to resist drought and insects. But you also want an adequate number of deadwood features to provide for all of this biodiversity that's part of a healthy forest. So that's an important topic. So if you see a tree like this and you're out there with people who may not know, take a moment and just say, God, what a nice tree. And they'll go, which one? You say, well, that dead one with all the holes in it. Look, it's got Vos swifts and everything else. And little kids like woodpeckers. And so a few photo credits here. My wife, Greg Thompson and Contron. And I want to thank Audubon for hosting me tonight, and my friends for showing up, Washington State University. And thank you for sticking around through the technical glitch. That was a new one. I don't know what I did. And perhaps we can visit the chat now. And Debbie, you can moderate. And maybe we could walk back through and you can find, I lost the earlier questions when I logged back in. So thank you. That's what I had. And how long was that? That was about an hour. So we're okay. Everybody still awake?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Maeve.
So again, if anybody wants to write your question into chat or even speak up and go ahead and unmute yourself, you can use the raise hand feature or just go for it, and we'll get that sorted out.
So should I read the ones that I'm seeing in chat here? Or do you have some? Do you have some from earlier that we could start in order?
A question or a query from William, wondering if a fire-impacted tree will fall quicker than the 200 years you mentioned.
I will respond to that. I think it really depends on what the roots are wrapped around. And so not necessarily, because it depends on what happened, because the fire impact is going to be on the stem and above, but the soil would be looser. But I think it's just going to depend on literally the mechanics of how that tree is rooted to the ground. So maybe, I don't know. And okay, so to that end, the roots of burn trees do help hold the soil on the hill, and the tipped over trunks will also help with erosion as the root mass of the the root mass of the plant life responds when it comes back, because remember that picture of all the dead trees from the Methow, and it was so green underneath? That was 1 year of forbs. And so that's one issue with fires, is you've got to get that green flush just to help hold the soil in place. Okay, go ahead, Debbie. Go back to.
And then a straightforward question. What's a butt log?
Oh, that's a good, God, I just threw forestry lingo at you. That was from logging. So the bottom of the tree, the bottom of the tree is that last piece. Sometimes it's either flared or it's not of a consistent, and they'll leave the butt log. So the butt log is the bottom. It's the biggest piece.
And from Ron and Beth, I can answer this one. How does Sasquatch use dead trees? And my answer is in a big way. but take it, Ken.
I'm going to work on my Sasquatch song. We put that one in there right there. Yeah, that means somebody actually read that list. by the way. Funny.
And then a question from Julia. I've heard there's more life in a dead tree than a live tree. Is that true?
Yeah, actually, yes, because a live tree is actively keeping other organisms out of the middle of it by way of its defenses, pitch tubes, et cetera, et cetera. And the number of other species that is able to use it once it's dead, it's really interesting. It skyrockets. So you think about a live tree, the outside of it is available, but the inside's not available unless it's somehow opened up, or and if it dies, the whole thing is available. This is even true, digress for a moment, in aquatic systems. So when the river restoration people make log jams, there's all of these insects and plants and things that can live in the wood that can't live in rock. Rock is inert. So yeah, and Bill Weiler, he knows all about that because he works on the Sandy River. Yep.
Question about woodpeckers. Male and female woodpeckers both brood and raise young, but are they monogamous, pairing up with the same bird year after year?
I think they tend to be. They're not like ducks who are switching around every year. And a territory will be occupied by the same pair, particularly for non-migratory species like pileatids. And so they tend to stay together, a little bit like some raptors do. But they're not, they don't like, quote, mate for life. They seem to be in the territory. So it varies by species too. There's like 14 different species of woodpeckers, and they all have really funky little variations on their lifestyles. Yeah. Is that anybody have something to add to that? Did I get that about right? There's a lot of birders in the group here. So that's one thing about speaking to an Audubon club is, you make some generality about birds, and there's somebody on that Hollywood Square screen there thinking like, oh no, that's not. So,
We definitely have some agreement on the pileatids being monogamous, or at least from season to season, mostly monogamous. That is, mostly the pair will return. They show a lot of site fidelity. So if both
there
the
you
male
go.
and female are, around during breeding season, then they do stay monogamous.
Yeah, yeah. No, here you go, Julia. Thank you, Julia. Pileates are monogamous, as I understand it. Yep. Excellent.
From Bonnie, do the roots of burned dead trees still hold the soil from landslide?
So they would somewhat, yes. Not as much as live tree. When you think about it, a live tree has lots and lots of fine roots. And so what goes on above your head in the crown of a tree is a imperfect mirror of what's going on down below in regard to like fine roots. So if you imagine needles being the analog to the fine roots, the tree dies and the fine roots fall off first. And then even, I may be wrong about this, but snags that persist for a long time often will be older trees that have heartwood in the roots. So you think of a big root, it's going to have a heartwood element to it. And one thing about heartwood is it tends to resist rot, and some species more than others, not all, but the center of a tree. So yeah. So yes, but not as much as a live tree.
And this is not a question, but I agree with Julia here. Very encouraging news, especially now that we have so many new dead trees.
Yeah.
So another question, what about petrified wood? Does it require volcanic activity to produce petrification?
I've got a feeling that Ron is a geologist and he's trying to trick me. Is there a geologist in the room? Do we have a geologist in the house? I don't know.
I'm not a geologist, I was just curious. So.
I like it. That's funny. Yeah. So go ahead. That's funny.
The next question from Melissa. With all the burns sure to come, thank you, climate change, do you expect certain species to thrive with greater dead tree availability? Or is everything doomed, more or less?
I think you're referring to dead tree habitat dwellers. I'm assuming that. And, I think there will be, and I'm using our hill as an example, there are going to be some species that actually benefit. And one interesting one might be bluebirds. So all of a sudden, there will be areas that were dense, dark, old conifer forests that are now essentially meadows full of snags. And for 60 years before they fill in with trees, you're going to have bluebird habitat. And an irony is that the shrub layer will recover really well. There'll be a lot of species of shrubs that actually survive the fires, some of the willows and things. And the habitat for browsers, deer, bears, will be better. There'll be really good habitat for things that live associated with the shrub layer. And we didn't really go into that tonight, but the shrub layer is a very, very rich habitat for lots of our native species. So you can break forest habitats into low shrub, high shrub, low trees, tall tree, or excuse me, medium trees, tall trees with varying states of life, particularly in the tall trees. And when you have lots of tall trees, the shrub layer tends to be somewhat diminished because of shading until you get a really old forest where they're coming in more. And so you take all that shade off from above, and your shrub layer will actually, it'll go. So there you go.
Thanks for putting a positive spin on it. It's always nice to think about the good that comes from forest ecology.
It is pretty interesting because I think, I would suggest to everybody, pick a place that you already are familiar with that burned up, and then it's going to be heartbreaking to go back, but go there as soon as you can, take some pictures, then go back every year to the same place and watch it change. And I think you're going to be startled at how quickly the lower level vegetation recovers. Not so much the overstory. The overstory will never come back in your lifetime, but there you go.
That's a great idea, Ken.
Yeah.
And another question, what advice would you give to small forest landowners after the burn? Leave it as is, or?
So woodlandfishandwildlife.com, after the burn, we actually wrote a whole article to that exact point. And the first thing people always wonder is, do I need to salvage log? Should I? Could I make some money off it? There's that whole thing. And yes or no. And if not, if for whatever reasons you decide not to, then it's just a matter of dealing with hazard trees that might fall on your house or fall over your road. So I'll use a case in point, that the picture of the little snag forest that I described, our neighborhood road goes right through that. And I have been leading a neighborhood, non-coalition of leave the trees alone and we'll clean them up when they fall. And we have one neighbor who would have hired a cutter to come and cut them all down along the road. We would have cut down hundreds and hundreds of trees if he had gotten his way. And so basically we actually did cut down probably 20 that were leaning towards the road. But then the rest of them, it's like, you know what? If they land on the road, and me and two other people, we've been jumping on them when they fall, and then you throw it off to the side. So, Julia, it really depends. Like, for example, you might want to plant. You might want to plant trees to get your forest going again quicker, particularly while the shrub layer is not well developed, because you have some really good site preparation. Now I'm being a forester for a moment. The burn has gotten rid of all the competition, and those little trees will have a really good chance to get a jump on it. If you wait, those shrubs are going to come in like mad, and then you're going to have to fight them. So you might want to plant. You might want to plant mixed species. Definitely leave the standing dead trees every place that you can. Watch out for weeds. Here's one too, is watch out for weeds and erosion, because you can get really bad infestations of certain nasties, and it varies depending where you are tremendously. So there's a lot of things to do, but erosion is your first one. Weeds.
No pee-pees.
What's that? Yeah. So here you go. So Julia, did that answer your question more or less? Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, check out that article, because we actually, a little committee of us, we went through and we were trying to boil down that exact question so that people whose forest burns up would essentially have like a decision tree, looking at the things that are immediate and the things that aren't immediate, because it varies a lot. And there's going to be a bunch of people in that boat, like really soon. Yeah.
We will locate that document, that information, and post it on our Facebook site for sure to share with people.
Okay, sure.
And,
Yeah. It's public domain, and you can find it. And if not, send me an email and I'll send you the article, and you can just forward it around.
okay, that's great. Did anybody else have any questions?
Oh my gosh, what fun! What fun! I hope Joni's still on there. I can't. I don't know. Boy, this is interesting. I had this totally funky experience there with Zoom. Joan Taylor's still there. Hi, Joan. Thanks. Okay. Um, yeah. Anything else? And so I stuck my email contact here. Let me put that back up. There it is. So if anybody wants to send me a question or something, please do. I'm easy to find, and this is what I do. You know, I love to answer inquiries. And so Julia, send me a note, and I'll forward you that article if you want. But anybody, but there, yeah, easy to find. Ken Bevis, DNR.gov. I work with some good people in Oregon as much as I can. And yeah, I have the coolest job I've ever had, just getting to do this. And, you know, to remind people of the value of dead trees is, I think it's pretty important. So there you go. And Audubon. And by the way, keep up the good work, Audubon. I love Audubon. I'm a member of North Central Washington. I am an ex-president of the Yakima Valley chapter. And as the officers know, that's one of those dubious honors that you're like, whose turn is it?
Well, hey, Ken, you've given us a wonderful program. You're a wonderful educator and a great songwriter and singer, and we really are appreciative of your time and energy here. And as we all kind of commented on, it's been a very time-sensitive, appropriate conversation. So you've helped us kind of smooth our jangled nerves about fires and the long-term view, and really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you.
Oh, my great pleasure. I have to tell you, I love talking to Audubon groups because everybody's knowledgeable and sympathetic, and it's like being with family. So I thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And there is a question from Julia, and I was going to mention before we sign off, we're also going to talk about next month's program, is that we will have a recording of this program. Debbie's been recording it. We plan to post that also on Facebook and on our website. And ultimately it will live a long life on YouTube, hopefully. So we will have that available for people who weren't able to tune in tonight. But we're so happy to see everybody here tonight. And I think we're going to talk about the upcoming program for next month. And again, thank you so much, Ken. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yay, what fun.
Great. Debbie, do you have the slide to show for the next program?
I think I can do that. Maybe Ken, if you can stop sharing. Sorry.
Sure, how do I do it?
You should have a button. I think I can do it from here.
Oh,
Thanks.
I'm in control. New share. There you go. You got it.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Yep.
And so this is a quick reminder of our next program meeting, which will be on our typical fourth Tuesday, which this upcoming one will be October 27th at 7 o'clock. And we're going to enjoy both the art and information that Janet Esley, who is also from Washington State, is going to provide us about the red knot, which will be something we really look forward to learning about as well. So please stay. Well, I doubt if somebody just asked me in my ear, is she going to sing? But I think Ken is a one-off for that, and a wonderful job on the singing also.
And Janet is a dear friend, and she is a spectacular artist. So don't miss this program.
We look forward to it. We have a lot of artists in our community, so we do look forward to that. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I think we were up to about 68 people watching tonight, which is a great thing to be able to do. And once again, coming together means so much to all of us to be able to share this this time. So thank you again, and be well and be safe. And we'll see you next month.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Ken. That was a great presentation. We'll look forward to hearing from Janet next month. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone. Thanks, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good
Thanks.
night.
Yeah, good night, everybody. Thank you.